I'm Park Howell, and welcome to the Business of Story, where I consult, teach, coach, and speak on the applied science and bewitchery of brand and business storytelling, so that you can clarify your story to amplify your impact and simplify your life.
I thought it was just a stupid picture of a pig in the ocean. But after hearing that story, I had to have it. Now I wasn't just buying a picture. I was buying a story. Story literally made the picture worth more money to me.
That's what businesses are about. People buy brands. People buy stories much more than anything else.
I work with a lot of big enterprise companies, but let's just say I always tell folks, drop the PowerPoint, close your laptops, start with your story.
If you want people to get engaged and you want people to act, you have to tell them an emotionally powerful story. That's with great characters, it's with uncertain outcomes, and it's with high stakes and drama.
All business strategy is a story.
Hi, I'm Park Howell, and I am so glad you're back here with us today on the Business of Story, but I have a confession to make. I'm a weirdo. Why, you might ask? Well, because I ran our ad agency for 20 years, and I did not like the TV series Mad Men. I know it's like practically sacrilege to be in the ad game and not have binged on the iconic TV series that followed the career of the brilliant but dysfunctional Don Draper. It's not that I didn't appreciate Mad Men, it's just that I found it dark and I had a hard time rooting for some of its main characters. It might also be because it ran for 7 seasons right through the heart of the recession. I was so busy keeping our ad agency afloat that escaping into the dystopian ad world of the 1950s seemed to only add to my madness. Although, I'll admit, they had some brilliant bits, like when Draper was selling the Kodak folks on calling their slide projector wheel a carousel because it was a time machine that transported you back into a pastime you ached for. Or when he beguiles the Hershey candy executives with a powerful story during their agency pitch, only to retract it as a lie a moment later. I mean, it's pretty good stuff. Powerful storytelling, no doubt. But what I needed at the time was the power found in a group of what I call committed bystanders. What I mean by committed bystanders are professionals who are interested in your success, but not emotionally wedded to it like you are. I mean, these are folks that can come in and give you ideas and pointers and help you see things that you simply can't see because you're getting pummeled almost every single day trying to run your business. It's hard to make the correct decisions unless you have folks outside the ring giving you pointers and rooting for you in the process. On today's show, we have just the person you want in your corner if you're running an agency of any kind, be it advertising, PR, web, digital, or design. Heck, even if you're not in the ad business but are running a company, you will do well to listen to the wisdom of Drew McLellan. In addition to growing his own ad agency, Drew runs Agency Management Institute, an association serving more than 250 small to mid-sized agencies. He helps agency owners increase their adjusted gross income, or AGI, where their real profits are found, attract better clients and employees through the brand stories they tell about themselves, and enjoy the glorious perks of owning an ad agency. I threw in the glorious part, by the way. One of the things that's interesting about AMI to me is that it is the only agency network that is run by an active agency owner. I mean, Drew really knows his stuff, and that's what he's going to share with you today. We cover some topics like why so many ad agencies tout being full service when they should really be experts in a niche and be telling that story. Why, ironically, many agencies are afraid to go big and bold with their own brand story, even while they're preaching the same for their customers. And why an agency owner must evolve from being a firefighter into the fire chief for the survival of their own firm. We're going to cover all of that and much, much more on today's show, which begs the question, at least for me, I wonder what would have happened had Don Draper had Drew on his team. Perhaps they'd be in their 14th season on AMC. Anyway, glad to have you here. Please welcome, between your ears, Drew McLellan of the Agency Management Institute. Hey, Drew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to it.
Man, this is great. You and I got a chance to meet in person, about 2 months ago, kickoff of baseball season. You were in town for a Diamondback game.
Yeah, it was opening weekend for the Diamondbacks. So the first weekend of April is when it was. So our meeting was long overdue.
And you're from Des Moines, Iowa, right?
That's not my hometown, but I've lived here my agency has been here for 25 years. So I guess you could say, yes, it is home now. That's for sure.
And what brought you out to Phoenix for that Diamondbacks baseball? I imagine you're not a big Diamondbacks follower.
No. So on one of the items on my bucket list is to get to every ballpark in the country or, in the league. So Canada too. And the Diamondbacks were one of the last 4 that I had not been to. And so I was talking to a friend of mine and he has the same thing on his bucket list. So we compared teams and found that we both had the Diamondbacks in common. So we looked at the calendar and I said, okay, let's meet in Phoenix? And he said, all right. So we both hop on planes, had dinner with you and some other friends on a Friday night, saw a ball game on Saturday and flew home on Sunday.
And it was great because we got a chance to get better acquainted. I think we met very briefly through a fellow ad agency biz dev guy, Michael Gass.
Yep,
or at least he's
right.
Connected us online, but we had a chance to have dinner and it was really great. And then you invited me on your podcast. Thank you so much for that. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too.
And it's great now to have you here to talk about storytelling in the ad agency world, and not so much even about how they use it for their own clients, but how they use it for themselves to differentiate themselves in the market.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about the Agency Management Institute and how that all came about, because you really started as an ad agency guy before running the Institute, right?
Right. So other than a brief stint driving golf carts through the Minneapolis airport, my entire professional life has been working at ad agencies. And so in 1995, I was sort of the perfect combination of arrogant and ignorant. And I thought, how hard can it be to run an agency? And so I started what today is McLellan Marketing Group. And knock on wood, almost 25 years later, it seems to be working.
Congratulations.
Thanks. But along the way, very quickly, I realized that I was both ignorant and arrogant, and I needed some help. And so I found an organization that back then was called Agency Management Roundtable. And that organization was started under the understanding that most agency owners are accidental business owners. They're awesome at some aspect of serving clients, but somehow they ended up owning an agency, and all of a sudden paying attention to things like what the P&L says and all of that is not really their strong suit. So this organization was created to teach agency owners how to run the business of their business. And so thank God I found them, because it completely changed the way I was running my fledgling business at the time. And fast forward, 10 years, and the gentleman who started that wanted to retire. And he came to me and he said, Drew, I think you're the guy. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I think you should buy Agency Management Roundtable, and I think you're the guy that can take it into the 21st century. And so, long story short, at first I was like, I don't want to be the guy. I already have one risky business. I don't need two.
I'm already a guy.
Right. I'm like, I don't need 2 risky businesses. But anyway, we talked for about a year, worked it out. And so for the last, 10, 12, 15 years, something like that, I have been running what is now called Agency Management Institute. So we work with independent agencies, anywhere from a couple FTEs to several hundred FTEs, and help them run the business of their business better. So
FTE is
full-time equivalent. So a couple employees to several hundred employees.
Gotcha.
Most of our agencies, I would say, fall in the 50 people or less range. And we work with them in a plethora of ways. So we have these agency owner peer groups where they come together physically twice a year and hang out with other agency owners and share best practices. We do workshops, and we have a podcast, as you mentioned. Thank you. Build a Better Agency, that has been around for about 3 years. So my job is really just to help agency owners make more money, have more fun, stabilize the business, and build it so if they want to, they can scale it and grow it.
In 1995, and you were running this company and it was taking off for you, what were your gravest concerns that you went to the Agency Management Roundtable to figure out? And do you still see a lot of owners today doing the same thing in search of those same questions?
Well, you tell me if this sounds familiar, because we have a lot of agency friends in common. I sought them out because we were working our tail off. We were busy, we were slammed. And yet at the end of the month and the end of the year, we didn't have any money. And, it turns out that was a mix of bad scope documents, bad estimating practices, over servicing clients, the very same things that I talk to agency owners about today, every single day.
Do you remember Second Wind?
Sure. Yeah.
And I don't know if they're still around or not, but they were my agency management roundtable. I had heard about them. I don't even remember when. And I think it was 2007. I made my first trip up to Vegas and sat in a 2-day workshop. Same type of thing. I was running parking company. We were making some money. It was growing quickly, but it was just always felt out of control to me.
Yeah.
And we were technology, of course, was coming into play in a big way. And we weren't ready, like most agencies or all agencies, to handle the digital revolution. And I was up there and I learned so much in just those 2 days of their teaching and coaching, but then also commiserating with the other agency owners sitting in that group.
Yeah, there's great power in being with the owners. And one of the things that people will often say to me after one of our workshops is, oh my God, that was like drinking from a fire hose. Mm-hmm. Why haven't I known all of this? And so, but yeah, Second Wind is still around. Tony Mikas started that. Unfortunately, he has passed away, but he started it about the exact same time that Dave Wood started Agency Management.
Wow. Okay.
So they were peers back in the day. And, both of them knew their stuff. Both of them had worked in agencies and then sold their agency to start these consulting firms. And so one of the ways that I did things a little different, and one of the things that makes us different than other agency consulting firms, is anyone who works with an agency out of AMI still owns and is actively involved in their own agency.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Things are changing so fast, you'd be out of touch so quickly today. I think you could do it back in Dave and Tony's day. But, when you think about what we're going to offer clients in 2 years doesn't even exist today. So how in the world can I consult and be a good guide and mentor if I don't keep my hand in the pot?
Yeah. So what about storytelling in agencies? I know you have a position thinking most agency owners, if not all, are natural storytellers. And I guess the argument could be all of humanity. Every one of us is a natural storyteller in our own way. We just don't all make a living at it. And yet it seems like the advertising and a lot of the marketing we see, and even the positioning for an ad agency is lacking story, lacking a narrative. How do you help people overcome that? Or what's your view on it? Maybe you see it differently than I do.
Yeah, no, I do think most agency people are sort of natural storytellers. And as we were talking before you hit the record button, I think you see that when you're chatting over a drink or meeting them for breakfast and you're just talking. They just naturally tell. They're great storytellers. But for some reason, when it gets down to either on the client side, sitting down to write an ad or create content or whatever, we've sort of turned into this bullet point factory where everything is about features and benefits, and we rarely take our time and ease up into that with story, so that by the time we get to those important details, the audience is already interested in us and has a connection to us. And I think the same thing is true when you look at how agencies behave when it comes to themselves. So if I'm in a workshop of 50 agency owners and I make them go around and introduce themselves, and I'll say, tell me your name, your agency name, where you're located, and how you describe your agency. 95% of them are going to say, and again, they could have 2 employees or 250 employees, but the exact same phrase comes out of their mouth. We are a full service integrated agency. All of them, exactly the same, which means, and when we all tell the same story, and I'm not arguing that that's a story, but when we all put the same label on ourselves, what it means is we're not saying anything at all, because it just gets lost in the sameness of that.
There's no differentiation whatsoever.
Absolutely.
And they're talking about functionality.
Right.
Functionally, we're a full service digital integrated agency. What the hell does that mean? Nobody knows what the hell that means.
Well, in theory, what they think it means is, and if I push them on it, what they will say is, we can do everything under our roof. We don't outsource or whatever. And honestly, we all know that that's not true. That it's a very rare agency. And honestly, it's a very large agency that can not outsource anything. The work that we do today is so sophisticated and so specialized that there are very few agencies I know. And again, we work with 250 or more agencies a year that don't have to outsource something.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, it's, as you said earlier, it's just changing so quickly. There's no way to remain on top of it.
Right. So I think what happens is they say that because, and this I think gets to your question about why there's not a story. They say we're a full service integrated agency because they think that covers all of the bases, that there is not a client on the planet that doesn't describe the agency they're looking for. And I think that's the mistake. I think that's the misnomer of our business is all money isn't good money. You and I have both learned that lesson many times from clients. And the best money we can make is when a client and the agency are in great alignment. And the way you get to that alignment is by shared values and that you connect to each other's story. But if I don't tell you my story, then how in the world are you going to know whether or not I'm the guy that you want to hang out with and that you want to get your marketing advice from and all of that?
So of your agencies that you help, consult with, who, you don't have to name them, but who or what niches do they serve that are at the absolute top of their game? They're making money, they're having fun, they're turning away business because they stand for one thing. Can you share a couple of those agencies and what kind of industries?
Sure. And what's interesting about this is, and I'll give you some examples to sort of illustrate the point, is the industry is sort of irrelevant. The fact that they have an industry or a niche is what's relevant. So, we have agencies that are deep, like 3 generations deep in the ag and outdoor living space. And these are people who not only live in farm country, who often many of people of the agency employees have farms, or they're hunters or fishermen or campers. So they literally live the life that their clients are selling to, right? So that is very authentic. They can talk about, how they used to go hunting with their grandfather, or, that they're a 3rd or 4th generation farmer and they're raising pigs or whatever it is. And that agency is very, very large. On the opposite side of that equation, I have an agency that's very small, less than 5 employees. And their niche is that they only service the knitting and craft industry. So knitting needles, yarn, pattern makers. And when I first met this agency owner and she was telling me about this niche, I have to admit the first thing that popped in my head is, how can you make a living only working with knitting clients? I mean, it's just an industry I don't really know very much about. And over the years, as I've worked with her, I've gotten much better educated about it. But remember, at AMI, we see everybody's financials. So I see their P&L, I see their balance sheet. And I'm telling you, that's a brilliant niche for her. And she's doing just fine. And in fact, she's doing much better than many of my generalist agencies who are 4 or 5 times her size. And by the way, everyone who works for her knits.
I had mentioned Michael Gass earlier, Fuel Lines, because he has helped me over the years and just messaging and focusing and whatever. And were you in Nashville a couple of years ago when he did his? Yeah, that's where I thought we met originally back there, very, very quickly blowing through. But I remember this was 2015, and it was when I was considering rolling back my agency, turning over and just totally focusing on business of story. At that conference, and there were a number of agencies represented there, and you could see a lot of worried faces in that crowd because they were coming out of the recession and the digital world was still kicking their ass, and you were hearing a lot of this. We're a whole, fully integrated, holistic agency, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, right.
The only guys that were doing anything and really just totally content and appeared to be killing it were the ones that were extraordinarily focused. And there was this one guy there, I think he was out of South Carolina. Looks like he came right out of like a Ducks Unlimited catalog. He had, like the camouflage overalls on, a big beard and the whole thing. And he was smiling from ear to ear. And I asked him what kind of work he did. And Drew, he said all they focused on was hardwood cabinetry suppliers. And they represented these customers all over the country. And I said, well, aren't they all competition to each other? He goes, well, yeah, they mostly are. And they don't mind working with the same agency? No. And I go, why is that? He says, because we're absolute experts at their world, at their life, and we can help them get their fair share of the pie. And that blew me away because he's not the kind of agency owner you would expect standing there. And yet he was killing it because he was so incredibly focused.
Yeah, we do primary research every year. It's called the Agency Edge series. And back in, I think it was 2015, and all the research is focused at CMOs and business owners and people who hire agencies. And we were asking them about how they choose an agency that year. That was the focus. And one of the interesting things that they said was, I want a specialist. I want somebody who knows my industry. And I want at least 25% of their business to be in my industry for me to consider them a subject matter expert. So this whole idea of the exclusivity and all of that, I think when you serve the local butcher, baker, and candlestick maker, and you are a generalist, and so you are, bound by geography, that's when one car dealer doesn't want you having another car dealer. But, I've got agencies in my peer networks that almost all they do is automotive, and they literally will have one brand. So let's say it's the Toyota brand, and they'll have Toyota dealerships and Toyota groups all over the country. And so again, it's about that depth of expertise. And as our work gets more sophisticated and complicated and difficult, the demand for that specialty knowledge gets greater and greater.
Yeah. Speaking of specialty knowledge, a good friend of mine, Greg Head, who's a former head of marketing for Infusionsoft and helped them grow by up to 100 million in revenue. And he's always been in the tech world, software world. And he says the same thing you do. He said, you have to have that one thing that you really stand for. And he relates it over to restaurants. And I saw this in Amsterdam. There's a restaurant there called the Avocado Show. And all they serve is avocados in every possible way you could imagine. And it is delicious. But you can't get into that restaurant unless you are willing to stand on that corner for an hour to an hour and a half before it opens up. And they don't serve steak. They don't serve lobster. They don't serve chicken. They don't serve anything but avocado and avocado dishes. And if you go on their website at The Avocado Show, you'll see exactly what I mean. But talking about that absolute niched offering that nobody else serves. And you think about it, when you go to restaurants, it's typically a restaurant that is really known for one thing. They may sell you a few other odds and ends, but they're known for that one thing.
If they're popular, right? So it's very rare that you say to somebody, hey, let's go out to dinner. Where do you want to go? Most of us are going to say, oh, I feel like Italian or Mexican or whatever. No one says, you know what? I'd like a smattering of everything, right?
I want an integrated restaurant that does a little bit of everything.
A full service integrated restaurant.
So why don't agencies do a better job of focusing their brand story and telling that story? And why is it important to do so? We understand the focus side, but why is it important to actually have a narrative, have a story that people rally around?
Well, because I think at the end of the day, and this is why all brands, it matters that they have a story, right? I think at the end of the day, a story matters to every audience that is important to us as agency owners. It matters first and foremost to us as the owner. It helps set the direction, not only where we've been and kind of our history, but also where we're going. And then I think it's critically important, especially today as agencies are struggling with 25 to 35% turnover. It really matters to the employees. They want to know what their blood, sweat, and tears is working for. Who are we? What are we all about? What are the core values that this company is built on? What is our historical story? But also, what is our future story? Where are we going? And why do we matter? Like, who are we saving? Who are we helping? How am I using my talents to kind of a greater good? And then obviously it matters to the customers and prospects too, because our clients want to align with, just like we like to align with brands. You and I were having a conversation and admitting that we're both Apple guys. And part of that is because when I walk around with my iPhone or my Apple laptop or anything like that, that says something about me, that I'm an Apple guy. And I think that is true for agencies too. Our clients want to align with an agency that has a brand that they can proudly say, well, I'm with those guys. And you know what they're all about? They do this or that or the other thing, or, they have a depth of expertise in my industry, or whatever the story is. And obviously it matters to the prospects because they're looking for somebody to marry. And even if they only stay married to us for 2 or 3 years, which is sort of the average client tenure these days, the first 2 or 3 years are lovely, and they want to be with somebody that they can kind of fall in love with. And I think it's hard to fall in love with bullet points.
Why do you think we as agency owners default to bullet points and features and benefits? I have my own hypothesis, but I'd love to hear from all the work you do with agencies.
I think it's a couple things. Number one, as you know, figuring out your story is not easy. I think if you don't have a methodology like the methodology that you teach, then it's hard to come up with a story that's compelling. I also think that oftentimes agency owners dismiss their own story because it's not grandiose enough, or it's not big and bold enough, or whatever. And again, it may be that their story just is a softer story, or it may be that they just don't have the mechanics to tell their story. But I think a lot of it is just time. So I believe in most agencies, the minute someone walks in the door, what we do all day is we run and we put out fires. And it's, you walk in the door, you assess the situation, you find the biggest fire, you run and put it out, and then you look around and find the next biggest fire. And that's what we do most of the time. And those fires are all consuming. And the kind of work that you and I are talking about, this thoughtful kind of thinking through the process and sort of putting all of the elements of story together and understanding what are the elements of a good story and figuring all of that out, that takes time and it takes quiet. And if there is one thing that is lacking in agencies, it is the combination of time and quiet. So I think it's partially that too. And I think, like we talked earlier, I think they're afraid that if they have a story, because what a great brand does, and a great story is really about a great brand both attracts our right fit, our sweet spot clients, and it repels the others. And so what that means is some people carrying bags of money are going to walk away from you. And I think for a lot of agency owners, that just makes them hyperventilate.
I know it made me hyperventilate when I ran Park & Co. for 20 years.
Right.
Because you're like, what? No, we just hired 2 people. We could use that bag of money. But what happens is it aligns you with the incorrect client, and it hardly ever works, and nobody ever really benefits in that relationship.
No, you end up losing money because you're not a good fit. You end up twisting yourself into a pretzel to try and make them happy. And eventually they're going to go away, and you've overserviced them so badly to make them happy because you're not really the right fit that you don't make any money anyway.
Yeah. And I would say right fit, or in story terms, aligned. They're just simply not aligned. What they're looking for is in a completely different journey, different narrative than what you are trying to accomplish as an agency with your people. And I think that's what's a really beautiful thing, is when you do take the time and use a methodology to clarify your story and get like super focused. Not only do you align and get buy-in from your own people, it amplifies your impact. You end up doing much better work, making much more money for fewer clients. So it then leads to simplifying your life, because the one thing I've learned with all of us ad agency owners is we're pleasers, and we have a really hard time saying no. But once you've got your story really understood and everyone figured out, you say no way more than you say yes. And consequently, you have a lot less fires to put out. And you can focus your energy into doing terrific work that actually makes you money for, and this is the most important part, at least for me, for clients who actually appreciate what you have to do and are willing to pay a little bit more for it because they appreciate the effort you're putting into it.
Yeah. And I think, in very human terms, these are people that you are happy and proud to bust a hump for every day and to go the extra mile for. And these are people on the client side who recognize that you are going the extra mile to help them and for, to help them be the hero. And so as a result of that, of course, they're appreciative. We're making them the hero every day because we get them. We understand their industry. So we can be the catalyst to that. And, who doesn't want to be the hero?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you take us to a story, a moment, one of your clients at the Agency Management Institute that you've seen turn around, that they showed up and man, things were looking really, really bad and they were desperate for help. And they did get their niche, their story figured out and the impact it had on them and their business?
Yeah, actually I can. So this was many, many years ago. So I can remember being in an agency owner peer group, watching an agency present their financials, and they were deep in the red. They were deep into their line of credit. They had made some bad financial choices in terms of not laying people off when they should. And at that time, they were really a generalist agency. And they had some smatterings of industry expertise, but at this point, they were still not willing to let anybody with a bag of money walk away. I can remember thinking in my head, he's not going to be here in 6 months. We have to figure out something to save the day because he's about to go out of business.
What market were they in? What city?
They were in the Midwest.
Okay.
And over the course of the 6 months, several things happened. And I have to say, I wish it was always as deliberate as it should be. I wish everybody would learn your methodology and follow it. I wish everybody would do the things that we teach in some of our new business courses around identifying niches and, all of the things around connective tissue between your niches and all that sort of stuff. Sometimes it doesn't happen that way. Sometimes it's just a combination of dumb luck and, the good Lord watching over you.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it was a combination. So they had what I would call some soft niches inside the shop. And then through a weird happenstance, bumped into someone who was a CMO at a large manufacturing company that happened to align with one of the niches that they had. And so literally over a beer had the conversation of, oh my gosh, we're looking for an agency and, you should come in and yada, yada. And a week later, they signed this, $1 million deal with this manufacturer, which then gave them the credibility to wrap their arms around that industry because they already had experience in it, but it was a lot of little stuff. So it would have been hard to argue that they really had a depth of knowledge.
Can you share what industry that was?
Probably not.
Okay.
But because of that, then he got brave, right? Because now he had something big to wrap his arms around. He got brave. He started turning away business that didn't fall into the category. He started exiting some of the clients they already had on the roster that really weren't a good fit and really doubled down into this industry. And today, at that point, he was probably, 10, 12 people. And today he's, over 100 people. And again, I see his financials. And so I can assure you it's working out just fine.
And he's still with the Agency Management Institute then?
Yes.
Learning and growing. And then that leads me to the next question, because I had a really interesting conversation with a local PR guy here that works with one of the largest agencies in Phoenix, Arizona. And it's a group that's really grown, Drew, over the last 5 years. And now they are like right at the top of the rankings of the largest, most personnel, agencies.
Sure.
They're starting their office over in California and that sort of thing. And he told me, business is good. It's growing. And when I asked him, I said, but what's your one thing? What's the thing that really differentiates you? And he kind of paused and looked down at his toes. He goes, I know exactly where you're going with this, Park. And we don't have it. We are growing. We have this great momentum. And I go, but how are you going to sustain that? And they said, the same thing. We are a fully integrated whole, agency. We do everything to attract everything. And I go, but what happens when that doesn't work anymore? And it's bound to do that. And what is the advice you give to growing agencies when they go from 5 people to 100 people? How do they still maintain that niche, even though they are providing lots of different services in the process?
Well, if we're talking niche, which I think is a little different than story, but if we're talking niche, I think there's different ways to niche. So the natural one in our space is you niche to an industry. So I'm going to be an ag agency. I'm going to be a software as a service agency, whatever it is. I'm going to help a certain industry. Everybody, of course, is a healthcare and financial services industry, so that doesn't count because everybody has that.
And they service all kinds of industries, so they have no niche.
Right, exactly. Right. Everybody has a bank or a hospital or a doc office or whatever. But anyway, so the most natural way or the easiest way for us to think about niching is the vertical niche or the industry niche. But there's also a lot of agencies, fewer than the industry niche agencies, but an agency that niches down because they have a depth of understanding around an audience. So, I remember one of the speakers at that Michael Gass event that we were both at was an agency out of the Midwest, and I can't remember his name now, but all they do is work with clients who want to talk to millennials. And so he was he was an audience expert, not an industry expert.
He was the millennial guy. Yeah.
Right. Yep. Right. Then the third way to niche is, and I think this is the most dangerous, by the way, but a lot of agencies do it. And that's, what I call a specialty niche. We're a PR shop, we're an SEO shop, we're a web dev shop, whatever that is. The problem with that is, for example, if you were an SEO shop 5 years ago, you were printing money. You were just printing money because not a lot of agencies didn't know how to do it and weren't doing it well. But now fast forward to today, and most generalist agencies have an SEO team or person or whatever. And most agencies do a pretty good job. So all of a sudden, that point of difference gets dissipated. And I think that's the risk when you sort of think of a narrow band of services and that's going to be your niche.
So then how do you work with companies, with agencies when they grow like that to help them refine not their niche, but their story and making it actually meaningful to not only their employees, but their clients, and that really truly differentiates them in the market?
Yeah. I mean, we come alongside agencies and we talk a lot about sort of getting the foundational pieces in place. So many agencies grow despite themselves. One or two big clients can take a 5-person agency up to a 100-person agency. But to your point, it's hard to sustain it when it would be like going from being a baby to being 22 without all the years in between to learn how to talk and walk and do math and drive and all of that stuff. So now you're 22, but you look back and you go, I don't know how to do any of that stuff. It's actually, growth can be dangerous for an agency, especially rapid growth. So oftentimes they have experienced great success kind of in spite of themselves. And we have to step back and say, okay, we have to do the homework that you didn't do when you were 5 people. So what are the core values? What is your origin story? Why do you exist? Like who are you here to help and serve? And, to use your language, who are you here to make the hero? And what is it about you? So how can you be their Yoda if you have no idea what it is they do all day? So again, it's aligning all of those pieces and then helping them also understand, and I'm guessing you see this too, a story, you don't have 2 separate stories. You don't have an external story for clients and then an internal story for employees. You have a story which is our story, and there are different chapters that maybe play to the employees more or the clients more, but who we are in the story and how the story plays out, that's very core to, and typically to, the agency owner and why they started the agency in the first place and all of that. And then, we also help them identify what niches, where could you be a Yoda? Where do you already have a depth of knowledge and experience and case studies and a reputation? And why aren't we leaning into that in a more dramatic fashion as opposed to trying to be the agency that serves the butcher, baker, and the candlestick maker?
What is the greatest pushback you get or experience from agency owners when you start asking them these hard questions about what are your core values? Tell us about your origin story. Who are you for?
I think part of it's fear. I think part of it is it feels fluffy. It feels soft. It's not Well, Drew, tell me, if I have $1 million in AGI, how much of that should I be spending on my people? That's like a hard fact, right? So they love it when I teach them that sort of thing. And it depends on the agency owner. Some agency owners are drawn to this. They want to know and identify and be able to tell their own story. And others, it's like, I just want to do good work and I want to make good money. And sometimes they don't connect the dots that one leads to the other, to what you were saying before. So sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it is a reluctance to give up the time that it takes to do it. Sometimes it is they don't think they'll get the buy-in of their team or their leadership team or their existing clients. But honestly, usually it's fear. Even if they go through the hard work of doing it, they're not really ready to let go and just sort of fly, right? So if they are a baby bird, if you will, they are clinging to the nest going, yes, I want to get to the other tree, but I'm just going to hang on to the nest while I try to get to the other tree. And it's scary, and I get it. It's scary to say no, as you were saying. It's scary to say to a client who walks in with a bag of money, I'm sorry, but we don't serve banks. But let me introduce you to somebody who has a depth of expertise in banks, and I know we do a great job, but we don't do that. We only do credit unions, right? So it could even be that close to each other. But when an agency has a great brand and a great story, it literally could be, we do credit unions, but we don't do banks. Or, we do rural community-owned hospitals, but we don't do health systems. When the niches get that narrow, the riches are in the niches. We all know that. And intellectually, we completely agree with it until it comes to our own agency. And then we're like, no, I'll just take any bag of money.
Yeah, because it's that fear. It's survival. This thing, I gotta have it to keep feeding folks.
Well, and I think that's the point. It's not about it's not about the agency owner making money. It's them looking out over these 5 people, 10 people, 20 people and saying, they all have mortgages and they have kids in school and they have to feed those kids every single day. And if I don't pay them on time, I'm putting their family at risk. And so I think a lot of times agency owners feel this huge burden on their shoulders to take care of their team. And oftentimes, and you and I both, I don't know about you, but I've done this, and I've certainly seen many agency owners who've done this. Agency owners will pay everybody else and not take a paycheck and put their own family at risk because they're so worried about their people. So it's not from a place of selfishness. It's from a place of service.
Yeah. I mean, without a doubt, I remember having big production meetings in our office and everybody would be around the conference room table and I would look up and I'd ask myself, who are all these people? Where did they come from? I mean, I knew who they were, but it was like, Jesus, we're big. We're feeding all these people and their families.
Right. It's a lot of pressure.
Let's go get some more business, whatever it takes. Let's,
Right. There's a guy walking down the street with a bag of money. Grab him.
You look at the AGI and you think we got to bump that up a little bit.
Yeah.
Now with the business of story, I have the luxury of not having to feed all those mouths. I have probably the equivalent of a 7-person agency, although I'm not in the ad agency business, but people helping me with the consulting, teaching, and the brand story development for companies. But it's a lot easier for me to say, no. I had a call 2 weeks ago from ExxonMobil that wanted me to come in and work with them and their team around innovation in Dallas here next month. And the more I talked to them, and I went back to my old ways. I said, I got this. This is fantastic. I'm taking notes.
Right.
They'd called early in the morning. I was drinking coffee at home. My wife said, hey, that was ExxonMobil. It was fantastic.
And you're thinking zeros. There's a lot of zeros on the end of this.
Boom, 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 boom. By the time I got to my office, Drew, I felt that in my stomach that said, this isn't right. And I paid attention to it before. I never used to pay attention to it. I go, I'm not the right guy for this. This is all about innovation storytelling. And although mine works in that area, I knew of some guys in Melbourne, Australia, the folks at Anecdotes, that have the perfect program for them. And so I made the connection and I handed ExxonMobil off and I got home and my wife said, you did what? And I said, well,
Right.
I go, I've just done this for so long that it wasn't right. I wasn't the right guy. I could have gone in. I could have made the money. I don't think they would have been completely happy. I know I wouldn't have been happy. And she just smiled and she goes, yep, you're right. You did the right thing. I would have never done that before, Drew, but I am so now dialed in on what my story is, the brand story, and who I am for and who I can help. And you can actually really help people when you say no to them. and say, no, I'm not the right agency, but let me hook you up with one that is, you know?
Yeah, it may be the greatest service of all that you do that day. Absolutely.
Yeah, to everybody, not just to the agency, but for yourself to simplify your life and those that you are gainfully employing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How important with everything that's changing in the world, like you said, you're going to be offering as an agency services in 2 years that you haven't even thought of at this point.
Right.
Is it more important now than ever to have that story dialed in, do you think, and why?
Yeah, absolutely. I think brand and story become even more critical in this time of constant and perpetual change because it is the one constant, right? It is the thing about us that is evergreen, that is always true. And so what it says is all of this craziness is happening around me and you're watching, tornadoes and all kinds of crazy things flying around me as change happens all around us and our clients. But when I have my story straight, when I have my brand straight, I'm standing in the middle of that, but I'm in the eye of the storm. I'm the calm because I don't change. My agency is what it is. My business is what it is. And I'm going to be that for you today and tomorrow. And so at the end of any relationship, when you peel back why a business engages with another business, it is because we want to cling to them. We want to trust them. We count on them to meet a need or a want. And in our world, honestly, for agencies, if we get it wrong, yeah, we're going to lose the client, but our client's going to get fired. And so when you think about the buying decision they're making and the level of trust they need to have, because they are literally putting their job on the line when they say, I pick ABC agency over, XYZ agency. That's a huge decision for them. And so the more stable and secure and connected they can get to us, the easier it is for them to make that decision and the safer they feel in making that decision. And quite honestly, as you were saying, when we're aligned, the longer that relationship lasts and it continues to benefit both sides of the equation.
Well, I go back to what I'm always cheering about is when you clarify your story, you amplify your impact, and you simplify your life.
Right.
And I added the simplify your life on to the end. It used to be just clarify and amplify, but I just have found it because it gets you so super focused and those around you on what you're doing that you do it way better for fewer people, and it takes you less time and you make more money.
Well, and you know what? When you think about it from an agency perspective, when you're known as, let's say, the pharmaceutical agency that only does pharmaceutical products for women over 50, when you're known as that, right? So pharma agency, too broad, but what I just described, appropriately narrow. When you're known for that, one of the amazing things that happens, I don't know one agency owner who's like, yippee ki-yay, I get to do biz dev today. I get to call strangers and see if they want to give me money. Nobody enjoys that. But what happens when you have a great story and you've got all the proof points around you, the case studies and all of that, you get invited to speak at conferences, you get to write, you become a thought leader, all of that. But what the best thing of all is they call you and they go, I'm a pharma company and we have this new product that's going to be aimed at women 65 plus. And I know you're the agency that knows pharma for women over 50. And when can I get in and see you? Because we have to hire you.
Yeah.
That's a whole different conversation. And that is a much more fun conversation.
Yeah. Do your management institute clients believe you when you say that? Because so often it's like, yeah, that might work for someone else, but I can't imagine that working for me.
You know what? There's varying degrees of sort of skepticism among them, just like any population. But what I say to them is, how do you think you came to be my client? All I do is serve agencies. And that's all I talk about. It's my subject matter expertise. And not all agencies, by the way, small to mid-sized independent agencies, just like you. And every time I write a newsletter article or I have a podcast or I do a video, I get emails from people saying, oh my God, you're spying on my office. And I just go, okay,
You're the avocado show of small independent ad agencies.
That is right. I am the avocado show of small and mid-sized independently owned agencies.
But it's so smart. So as we wrap up here, two things. Where can people learn more about the Agency Management Institute if they're interested in signing up? And can you give us 1, 2, or 3 little tips that our listeners can go and use right now after this show to start building whether they're an ad agency, a PR firm, or something completely different? What would you recommend for them?
Yeah. So Agency Management Institute, the easiest way to find us is to go to agencymanagementinstitute.com. There's all kinds of information about the workshops, and we have live workshops and on-demand workshops, and you can get the podcast there and all kinds of stuff. So lots of free resources. Please avail yourself of all of them, some free ebooks and all kinds of other stuff. You can also get all of the executive summaries of the different agency edge research pieces that we've done. So I think we've been doing it 5 or 6 years. So every year we have a different topic. So all of that is available.
And do you have to be an ad agency, or what constitutes an agency in your world?
Yeah. So for us, literally our agencies are anywhere from full service, like traditional agencies that do sort of marketing plan all the way through execution. We have PR shops. We have web dev shops. We have product design studios. We have media buying agencies. So you name it. If you're in sort of the advertising PR media space, you will be amongst family and friends, because there'll be somebody in those meetings that looks just like you. Yeah.
And so give us some Drew Guru insights on what we could do right now to build our agencies.
So I'll tell you, the first thing is that most agency owners do not pay enough attention to their financials. So first of all, stop looking at gross revenue. It's irrelevant. I don't care how much you bill clients. What I care is how much money you have left after you pay all of your cost of goods. So in our world, we always talk about adjusted gross income. So that's gross billings minus your cost of goods equals adjusted gross income. And that's the money you have to spend on your agency. And if you look at that and you say, okay, how do I spend that money? The ideal ratio is 55% should be spent on loaded salaries, 25% on overhead, and 20% should be left for profit. And if you do that and you manage to those numbers, so if you manage to those numbers, and again, because you know your AGI, for every full-time equivalent, for every person that you have that you give a W-2 to, so not a 1099, not a contractor, for every W-2 employee, you need to have $150,000 of adjusted gross income. And if you follow just those simple numbers right there, you're going to put more money in your pocket and in your team's pocket at the end of the year.
Wow. There you go. So you've got us from the left brain logical financial side. Give us one emotional side.
I am a firm believer in the agency owner connecting with, and this gets right back to all of our conversation, of having a very clear idea of why they do this work. Because this, as you and I both know, this is not easy work. This is not, make $1 million, drive a Ferrari every year kind of work. So I think it's super important that agency owners have a strong connection to why they chose this industry and to tell that story on a regular basis. Because I think it connects the team. I think it inspires the team. I think it is the fuel that keeps us going on the tough days when we've lost a new business pitch or something like that. And I think it's the gas that helps us propel even faster and further when things are going well. But I think we have to remember why we're in it. And that to me is a complete heart thing. It's not a head thing. It is a heart thing. Why do I do this work? What do I love about this work? So, I went to a client meeting today, and happened to be a client that's local. And when I got there, they had this bonsai tree for me and a thank you card because I had helped them do some work. And as I was walking to the car carrying this bonsai tree and this card that they gave me, and again, remember, they paid me to do the work, right? So, but they were so grateful. And I thought, I am a lucky bastard that I get to do this work. And I have clients who value what I do so much that they give me gifts and money. Like, that's a pretty good gig, right?
Yeah. But it's also indicative that you know who you are and what you do and why you do what you do as an agency, because you're attracting the right people into your world.
Yeah, I'm very blessed. You're right. And it does start with understanding the story. And by the way, how you want the story to end, right?
Yeah.
You have to know the ending so you can build to the ending.
How do you want your story to end, Drew?
It's an interesting question. So I love my work. I am so grateful that I get to serve agency owners that are funny and smart and appreciative. And so really what I want to do is I want to create a community that is magic, that people feel like they belong there, like they're with their people, they feel safe, they feel that it's confidential, and that good day, bad day, whatever it is, when something happens in their world related, in most cases to work, but sometimes not, sometimes in their personal life too, that I'm one of the first people they think, I got to call him or I got to text him or whatever. That's my legacy, right? That I matter that much to them. That's a pretty good story.
Yeah, and you're having an impact not only on that agency principal, but probably more importantly on all the people they serve, from their own employees and their employees' families to the customers and the clients that they do a great job for. It's a tremendous impact, starting with, the insights that you have to offer.
Yeah, I hope so. That's certainly the goal. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Drew, thank you so much for being here on Business of Story. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
And folks, if you liked what you heard today and or have an agency owner in your life or a colleague or someone out there that maybe is not even in the agency world but could benefit from this insight, feel free to share this episode with them and Drew's wisdom. He's been doing this a long time, not only as an ad agency guy, but helping lots and lots of agencies around the country. So just an honor to have you here, from one old ad guy to another old ad guy, I guess, if we've seen a lot in our years.
Amen. Yeah, we certainly have. Thanks so much for having me.
And if I can be of service to you and help you understand how to clarify your brand story, meet me over at businessofstory.com, where I have a ton of tools, tips, techniques, and talent just like Drew there, waiting to help you clarify your story, amplify your impact, and simplify your life. And until next week, when we will have another amazing story artist right here on the Business of Story for you, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks for listening.